How to play Ready Steady Worm. The aim of the game is to get as many points as possible. Points are earned whenever a worm leaves the board, leaves the labyrinth. Each player will earn points depending on the number of matching gems they hold in their hand. So this player has 3 matching gems, yellow to yellow. This player has 2 matching gems, yellow to yellow, but the green doesn't count. And then this player has no matching gems, no yellows in his hand. So the first worm to leave the labyrinth earns players 1 point per matching gem. The second worm to leave the labyrinth earns players 2 points per matching gem, and the third worm to leave the labyrinth earns players 3 points per matching gem. The last worm is worth nothing. In Ready Steady Worm, each player takes turns in a clockwise order until 3 of the worms have moved out of the labyrinth and escaped. So let's put him back there. So this is how you would be at the start of the game. You will each secretly have one of these worms randomly. So we know that this player is the blue worm, or rooting for the blue worm. And then we have the player rooting for the magenta worm. And you're allowed to look at this at any time, but you can't share that with other players. In Ready Steady Worm, each player takes turns in a clockwise order until 3 of these worms have escaped, in which case the game ends and we go to the scoring. Every turn follows the following play. You move, and then you play, discard, or pass. So the way movement is done is you roll these 2 jumbo dice and move a worm according to what you roll. So there's a few different results here. Let's see what I get. So I got the owl symbol and blue. The red die determines how you're moving the worm, and the white die determines which worm you're moving. So the owl symbol in this case is I can move him in any direction I'd like, but I do have to move the blue worm. So I might move him to here. I might move him to here. You can only go 1 space. He can't move into another worm, and he can't go over a wall. So if he was here, he wouldn't be able to go through this wall to here. But I won't always have that choice. There are several results on this die. We have moving clockwise. So this would mean the worm would try and move clockwise. If a worm can't move for any reason, then he moves in exactly the opposite direction. So in this case, he would try to move clockwise. He hits the magenta worm. So he tries to move the other way, but he can't move that way either. He hits the yellow worm. If you can't move in the 2 opposite directions, then you may choose, he squeezes out and he moves to here. So for example, if he was already here and we rolled the clockwise, he would just move clockwise and you wouldn't have any choice over which way he moved. The other symbols are fairly similar. So we have moving inward, which would mean he would move towards the middle of the map. We have outward, which means he moves out towards the edge of the map. And then, as discussed, we have the owl die, which means that you can move him in any direction that you like. Similarly, we have the 4 colours, blue, green, yellow, and magenta. Then we have the owl die here as well, which is, so if I rolled this result, I could choose any worm to move inward. And if I rolled 2 owls, I could choose any worm and move them 1 space in any direction. Pretty useful. The final result on the choose worm die is all worms. In this case, you move all worms according to this die. So if I had moved this, I would move all worms outward. Now, when you move all worms, you can choose the order. So in this case, it won't make much of a difference, but I could move him out here, him out here, him either here or here, I can choose, and then blue out there. But if we're in a situation like this, I could choose, maybe I don't want yellow to get further out, so I could choose to try and move yellow first, but he bounces off blue and goes to the center, and then move blue out, giving me a bit of control over who goes where. Next, we move to phase 2, play, discard or pass, where you have the chance to play a card, discard any amount of cards, or pass. Passing is very simple. You simply pass play to the player on your left and it is their go. Playing a card means that you take a card in your hand, a goblin card that has a special action on it. So for example, this one is prod, and you may move a worm one space in any direction. You would play this card, placing it in a discard pile adjacent to the draw deck. Then you would draw a card into your hand so that you still have 3 cards in your hand. At the end of your turn, you should always have 3 cards in your hand. The third action you can do is discard. Discarding, you may take your cards. And so in this case, for example, if I was this player, I might think yellow's very unlikely to get out next. So these cards are useless to me. They're not going to score me any points. So I can discard as many of these as I like. Let's discard all 3 of them. And then I could draw up to 3. In this case, I've got some reds. Red seems like he might be able to get out pretty soon. So maybe that's a little bit better. Still got one of those pesky yellows though. When a worm leaves the labyrinth for any reason, whether that was halfway through a turn, whether that was through an action card, a goblin card, or, well, for any reason, then you take that worm and you place him on the next available podium. Every player reveals their hand and discards any cards that do not have a gem matching the colour of the worm that just escaped. So this player would discard this yellow gem. This player would discard all 3 of his cards. This player would discard these 2, but not this card. And this player would discard all of their cards as well. Note that if you had any goblin cards in your hand, you would discard those as well. So after we've all discarded our cards, we place the remaining cards, which would only be the gem cards matching the colour of the worm that just escaped, into our score pile. Bam. Can be nice to put your worm token on top of your score pile just to signify that it is that is your score pile, so stuff doesn't get accidentally shuffled back into the deck. After this has happened 3 times, so we have this worm exiting next. Let's pretend that we have 3 more cards in each hand. Of course, there would have been a lot of turns and a lot of work. I have not shuffled these well, have I? So those 3 would be discarded because we're looking at the yellow worm having escaped now. We would keep this yellow card in our score pile. All discarded. Again, poor shuffling. And all discarded. Then let's do the final worm. Again, there would be a lot of turns between all of this. Tactics. This is all going to be action cards, isn't it? I know it in my soul. As a side note, if the action deck ever runs out of cards, then you simply put the discard deck into the action deck, shuffle it all up, put it face down, create a new action deck. So we're going to have, let's have blue. Blue has escaped the labyrinth. So we reveal our cards. We have no blues here. No blues here. No blues here. And, ooh, a double blue in this player's hand. That's going to come in very useful for them. So we've just had the 3rd worm leave the labyrinth, leaving our podium full. And we can see the order of the worms with magenta first, yellow second, and blue third there. So now it is time to count up our scores. Each player reveals their score pile and counts up the revealed scores. So here we have 2 magentas, so that is worth 2 points, because magenta is worth 1 point for having left first. Then we have yellow is worth 4 points here, because there are 2 gems on the card, times by the second place of yellow. Then we have another 2 points over here, the double magenta card for magenta. And finally, we have the double blue for third place blue is going to be worth a whopping 6 points, putting this player into the lead. Finally, players flip their worm tokens to reveal in which worm was theirs and score points depending on the position of that worm. So we have magenta, very good for him. We have blue, green, and yellow in this case. If your worm is in first place, you will get a mighty 6 points. If your worm was in second place, over here, that is worth 4 points. If your worm was in third place, that is worth 2 points. And if your worm was in last place, get out of here. Not worth any points whatsoever. Which brings our final totals to 1, 2, 3, 4. Not so great. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Really good. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we have another 6 over here from 3 times 2, which means our winner is the magenta player over here, and their worm coming first as well. So well done, magenta player. In this example, you've done very well. And I hope that's made things a little easier for you guys playing at home.